We are going to get into that, but for now, it is the top of the hour, 5 o'clock Pacific time, 7 p.m. Central time, and we are welcoming you to our 12th SIP event and what feels like day 6,427 of Shelter in Place. And my name is Martin Cody, co-founder of Cellar Angels. And for those of you that are new to Cellar Angels, we are an online direct-to-consumer company specializing exclusively in Napa and Sonoma wines that you cannot get at your local wine retailer because they're very, very small production, high demand. Usually only get them on the winery mailing list or if you happen to be in the Valley. And since none of us have been in the Valley in the last 90 days, we are a perfect venue for you to secure some of the most prestigious wines in all the country. We are in our 10th year of operation, and we decided at the beginning of this virus to figure out a way to bring the winemakers into your living room. And as I mentioned, the 12th wine interview this evening is going to feature longtime Cellar Angels favorite and vintner, Kevin Bersofsky of Montagne, Russe. And Kevin, I want to welcome you and thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's only 5 o'clock here, so I'm just getting started.
Perfect. I love it. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, always. Right. We've started to do that. We look at 11 a.m. now, and we found a sister city of Chicago in Galway, Ireland, which is at 5 o'clock. So our 11 o'clock a.m. is now our new 5 o'clock. So I highly recommend that.
Well, I'm not Irish, even though I've got an Irish first name. But
you do. So the interesting thing about these formats and the fun that we get to have with them is we go pretty deep into the background, pretty deep into kind of the passion you have for wine. And I would love for you to kind of walk me through, I know you spent a very, very small amount of your life in Syracuse, New York, but let's start at the beginning and how Kevin grew up out on the East Coast and then moved west.
Okay, we're going to start after my mom met my dad. Okay. We'll go post that, yeah. So, so I was born in Syracuse, New York. My dad was working up there. I still have family where I used to have family up in Syracuse. Beautiful summers, horrible winters. In fact, winter, I think there's 2 seasons. There's winter and second winter. Yeah, so family moved down to Maryland pretty quickly. My dad got transferred. So I grew up almost my entire life right outside of Washington, D.C.
Where was that?
I live in Rockville, Maryland. So if you ever hear the song Don't Go Back to Rockville by REM, that is about my hometown, yes.
That is did you ever go back?
Yeah, my mom and my brother still live in Rockville, so I do it sparingly. But look, I mean, hey, it's a great place to grow up. I got out as quickly as I could. I went back into the cold. I went right back up to Ithaca, New York. I went to Cornell for my undergraduate.
Wait, hold on a second, because I want to focus on Rockville a little bit. You said your dad got transferred. What did he do?
Well, my dad, if I told you, I'd probably have to kill you. But no, seriously, he actually worked on spy satellites. He was an MIT graduate, engineer, spy satellites, control systems and nuclear warheads, really sexy stuff. When my brother was born, he was stationed in Alaska, tracking inbound Soviet nuclear launches if there were one. So really serious stuff, but he would kind of drop that line like, I can't tell you what I'm working on. And then he dropped something pretty cool. Like, yeah, I can read your wristwatch from space. You're like, really? So, you know, he would always drop a little hint like what the government could do. And you're like, my brother would be like, oh my God, did you hear that? Did you hear that? So my brother and I still talk about it today. Like, remember when dad said you could? Yeah, so that was what my dad did.
That's tough to beat as a little kid growing up. I can't get the REM song out of my head. So don't go back to Rockville.
Yeah, that is my town. But you know what? The funny thing about my dad is when you say it's not rocket science, well, he was kind of a rocket scientist. So he's one of the few people who can get away saying that. So,
by the way, fun fact: 10,000 Maniacs also sang that song.
Did they really?
Yep.
Well, it's the smallest small town in Maryland. So.
And then, so how old were you when you moved up to Ithaca?
College. Yeah. So I got into Cornell engineering. My dad begged me not to go. He told me it's going to be really hard. So it only made me want to go even more. So I went up to Ithaca, New York. I love the cold weather, actually. Sophomore year, second semester, I landed and tried to register for my second semester classes, and it was negative 25 degrees with a wind chill of negative 38. So you're in Chicago, you know how that goes.
Yep. We call that December.
Yeah, it was cold. I think I failed a gym class because I refused to walk across campus.
Well,
So,
and it's funny too, and I want to say hello to a couple of people, Barb Randall, Jeff and Jane Greasy. Jeff and Jane Greasy are the epitome of Cellar Angels because they haven't missed a SIP event. This is their 12th in a row. They are also used to cold weather because they are here in Evanston, Illinois. Jim Brubaker from Colorado, used to cold weather, but the great thing about Colorado is you can get 14 inches of snow and the next day it can be 70. And having gone to school in Colorado, I'm very familiar with that weather pattern. Julie Fogarty, right here in Chicago as well. And Catherine, Jarita, Catherine, I don't know where you live, but welcome to SIP. Freshman year in Ithaca, you failed the gym class. Did you do any of the tobogganing down the streets that they're known for in the winter months?
I'm very risk adverse.
Okay.
Very risk adverse. I don't ski. I've ice skated a couple times. If it involves any sort of danger, even my baseball coach, when a ground ball would come to me, he said, Kevin, you kind of olay all the ground balls like a bullfighter. I'm very risk adverse. Anything that involves anything where I could potentially have bodily harm, I avoid.
I like that. I can deal with that. And for those of you that have not been to Ithaca, New York, there is a phrase, and it's very apropos. It is gorgeous because of the number of gorges they have, incredible topography and scenery. And there are some incredibly steep streets on campus.
Yes, freshman year, I lived at the bottom of the steepest one. So every day I had to walk up. I was in amazing shape freshman year.
Not probably very not similar to my shape right now. I've definitely put on, I think, what we're referring to as the COVID-19 because.
Yes. I've gone from pear shape to apple.
Any like Macintosh, Red Delicious, are you just picking a style?
A big Fuji, yeah. So I've just recently gone on a diet, a post-COVID diet. I'm prepping for the re-release into the wild. So yes.
Oh, that's right. The rollback of the restrictions. So you went to Cornell for engineering.
Yes.
To be a little bit disobedient because Dad said don't do that.
No, Dad said go into engineering. He begged. He said, if you go into engineering, you can do anything in life. And that is probably the smartest thing. It was the Mark Twain quote. I was surprised how much my dad learned after I came back from college. Yeah, he was actually right on that one. You get an engineering degree, you may not be the most socially adept person on the planet, but you can do just about anything, right? So he was correct.
Absolutely. And it's another quote. It's like the older I get, the smarter my parents become.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, so did you know what you wanted to do at Cornell? I mean, it's one of the best restaurant schools in the world.
Yeah, I skipped all that.
Okay.
I went straight hardcore mechanical engineering. I realized somewhere I did a stint at Estee Lauder at their makeup plant in Melville, Long Island in the middle of college. And I realized at that very moment, I did not want to be a mechanical engineer. But I was already something like 90% through the degree. So I was like, we just got to finish this thing off. But that's Cornell did two really cool things. Number one, I got introduced to wines because they have this famous wines class. 600 people sit in a lecture. They pour you wines, your senior year in college. They take it very seriously. Fun time. Loved it. The second thing that happened was a buddy of mine roped me into skipping my senior year engineering classes to design a roller coaster. So I had an option of taking thermodynamics or building a roller coaster. And I thought, roller coaster sounds pretty good. So we goofed off the entire senior year and we designed a roller coaster.
Did you graduate?
I graduated.
That makes one of us.
Graduation, they told me I had $300 of outstanding library fines. That's a true story. I didn't even realize it. I negotiated it down to about 100, but so I graduated. I did.
It's impressive. I mean, yours was library fines. Mine was probably parking tickets. And my brother, when he was graduating in Indiana, they almost withheld his diploma because he had over $3,000 worth of parking tickets.
You could just buy it. You could buy a new car for that.
Well, that's what he told him. He says, I think you may have just purchased yourself a car because I don't need the car any longer.
That's awesome.
So then you graduate from Cornell, which is
Correct.
obviously no easy feat and quite an accomplishment, even while building a roller coaster. So congratulations on that. And I've heard about that wine class, by the way.
Yes.
And it's obviously it's part and parcel to the restaurant management school because the two go together. But I hear incredible things. And so then you decided to do what with that degree? And
yeah, so I got recruited by PricewaterhouseCoopers
Okay.
to do supply chain computer stuff. Paid the bills. It was fun. They flew me to such exotic locations as Union Beach, New Jersey.
Pittsburgh?
No, it was mostly New Jersey. I mean, all locations I'm going to mention are New Jersey. Owensboro, New Jersey, Union Bank, New Jersey, Princeton, New Jersey. I got to go to Florida for 3 months. I got to go to Holland for 3 months, but otherwise it was New Jersey. So, so after I moved out to the West Coast and I flew to San Francisco every week, but I realized, hey, this is not my passion. Fixing people's companies is not my passion. So on the weekends, I went to culinary school.
Which one?
So it was called the New School of Cooking in Culver City. It's a quick crash course, 20-week, certification course. September 11th happened. I just finished culinary school, and I said, you know what? I saw Emeril Lagasse on TV. This looked like an awesome lifestyle. Hint, it's not. But you get yelled at in French a few times. You realize how unbeautiful a language it can become. So so I walk into my first restaurant with a stack of resumes. The French guy goes, "You're hired." I'm like, great. So I start the next day and I work for 4 months and he didn't pay me a penny. So, and it was 6 days a week.
You just said you're hired. He didn't say he was going to pay you.
Yeah, bingo. I learned to ask more detailed questions over time. But yeah, so for 4 months, I worked 6 days a week, 12 hours a day.
Oh.
But I got an education. And so that was my foray into the culinary world in Los Angeles. Eventually quit that. I started my own catering company, which I, catered to movie producers and so forth. If there's any movie producers on the video chat here, you guys are awesome people. Not the easiest to work with, but you're awesome. And then I got a call from Sutter Home Winery.
Okay, so it's funny because I've heard you told me this before you got a call, and I forgot to always ask who called you. So you're down in Los Angeles, and you obviously have a little bit of flair of entrepreneurial spirit because you decided, hey, I'm going to get out of mechanical engineering and I'm going to go into culinary school. You did that. Then you decide I'm going to start a catering company, and you did that. And then you get a call from Sutter Home, and Sutter Home says, what? Hey, Kevin.
Hey, that stuff you were doing for PricewaterhouseCoopers, could you come up to Napa and do that for us?
Really?
Yeah, and this is actually how the phone call. And at the same time, PricewaterhouseCoopers calls me up, and they say, hey, could you come back and do your PricewaterhouseCoopers stuff for us again? So I had two companies. I had Sutter Home Winery in Napa, and I had PricewaterhouseCoopers in New York City asking me to do the same thing.
What year?
This was 2005.
Okay, so Sutter Home is sitting there going, we've got this SKU called White Zinfandel that has way too many zeros after it. We can't figure out how to balance our books.
Something like that. I'm not going to take credit for all the success of Sutter Home, maybe that much, but no, I'm just kidding around. But so the recruiter for PricewaterhouseCoopers, I said, I've got this other offer in Napa Valley for a winery. She goes, take the offer in Napa.
Good for her. That was awesome.
She knew she wasn't going to compete, right? So it was the exact same money. So I packed up the dog, my Hyundai Santa Fe, and I drove 7 hours up to Napa and, started a life in Napa. Worked for Sutter Home for 10 years. But
wow.
Yeah, so Sutter Home, I get in there after a year. They said, hey, Kevin, we want you to go work in production. I said, super, would love to do it.
So let me just back up for 1 second. Define for folks that may not be in the wine industry or as familiar with wineries as you and I, when you say production, what are the responsibilities? Is that tank top offs? Is that hose moving? Is it, what is it?
No. They wouldn't let me touch any of that. No. No, this was, Kevin, do your spreadsheet stuff, but do it in production.
Got
right?
it. Okay.
So this is like, you mentioned White Zinfandel. Kevin's job was, hey, we only have 1 million cases of White Zinfandel left in inventory. We need to go bottle some more. So Kevin, figure out when we need to make it. So
okay.
Yeah, but what I would do is on Fridays when time got when I didn't have a lot to do, I would go volunteer in the cellar, which was dragging hoses, which was, now we didn't top off tanks. You press like a keypad and a motor turn, and then they're making 20 million cases of wine. Nothing's in my hand, right?
This is the only thing manual is the keypad touching.
Bingo, right? So, I mean, one of my jobs on a Friday was that the trucks would drive in with 4-ton bins, and I would hook up to the bin and use the remote control and dump 4 tons of grapes into a hopper. And that was fun, except when you miss. And 4 tons of grapes go on the pavement, and then you're like, Kevin, out. You're like, you're done. You're done. So that was my first indoctrination into the winery. I mean, that's a 20 million case winery, right? Montagne Russe is 1,000 cases. So we're talking how many more zeros? It's crazy.
Yeah, that's an order of magnitude of which my public Colorado State school can't fathom.
It's a lot more wine than I'm making. Like we would miss by, like we were trying to make 4 million cases of White Zinfandel. We would miss by 300,000 cases, right? I'm making 1,000, so it's a crazy, but it's fun to see that it's fun. It's really cool. It's still wine. They're doing all the same processes, except my 1 or 2 ton press, they've got a 50-ton press. That's the size of a warehouse. It's cool. It's fun.
Jeez. Yeah. And they've got, 50 other presses that are multiple tons in different areas. And
bid for, but yes.
Okay. I forgot to mention you decided to go get an MBA at a small little mom and pop facility called Wharton.
Yes. It was either Trump University or Wharton. I chose Wharton. Good thing, because Trump University went under halfway through. No, that's still a joke. And I'm sure I've just pissed off 3/4 of everyone on the call. But anywho.
It's just you and I.
It's you and I, right. I went to Wharton for 2 years. And at this point, when I went to Wharton, I was already dabbling with making some wine in my garage. So, and in Napa, that's what we do. That's what people did. Everyone was kind of making their own little garage brew, like brewers and beer in the Midwest, we make wine, right? Italian families used to do it in their bathtub in New York City. I was doing it in Napa.
So would it be, and I've heard this before, okay? I mean, I've heard someone, a winery I know, they said, yeah, Tom Rinaldi was my neighbor. He saw me fiddling around in the garage with some Merlot, and Tom Rinaldi is of Duckhorn fame, and I think Merlot put them on the map. What's that?
Someone else told you that story as well?
Yeah. I heard it happens all the time with regards to what percentage of people that are in the wine business in Napa are probably making garage wine. It's got to be double digits.
A lot of people have a little backyard vineyard. They pull enough to make half a barrel. And look, hey, Napa is a pretty good place to grow grapes. So even a Napa failure is a success for most other places, in the world, right? It's pretty awesome climate. But Tom Rinaldi was my neighbor. But the way it really started was, I was walking my dog behind the St. Helena Library. St. Helena is in Napa. And it's November, it's 2006, just been there a year. And I noticed there's about 10 rows of Cabernet that haven't been picked, and it's November 2nd. So I go grab my trash can, and I just start picking grapes off these, because I figure, look, 6 o'clock, it's getting dusk. I'm going to run out there, and I'm just going to pick some stuff, ask for forgiveness rather than permission, or whatever the quote is. Made the wine. It was not very good.
So you have a degree from Cornell.
Yes.
You had an MBA from Wharton.
Yes.
You had a job and then a reoffer at PwC.
Yep.
And then you decided as you were walking your dog to become a felon and steal some grapes and trespass. That's right. You have to get caught first.
Recording this, right? This isn't being recorded, right? Okay, good. Okay. No, everyone turn off your recording devices. Well, yeah. Okay. So there's going to be a couple stories we're going to talk about today where the law is a very flexible thing, right? It can be pushed sideways like a rubber band a little bit, right?
Absolutely. So you made some wine for some grape shoots. And by the way, if James Simmons is on from Sims Production, the greatest film crew in the world, they too have a history of stealing grapes and making wine. But now we'll save that for another story.
Funny, because I just happen to have it here. This was the wine I made from those grapes, right?
Oh.
It's a 2006 Cabernet. This is my dog that I was walking, right? Long since passed away. And, so I go and I pick some of these grapes. I asked the winemakers at Sutter Home for advice, and they're talking to a guy who's making a half a barrel of wine, right? Meanwhile, they're making millions of cases. So I make this wine, not very good. It turns out it's actually pretty good now. It just took 14 years to come around. But so 2007, I'm walking the dog again. It's a year later. It's now November 7th. The rain's coming. I'm like, hey, let's pick some more grapes. Got my friend Malcolm, grabbed his two kids who were probably 5 and 8. I got 2 trash cans now, and we're just picking until it gets dark.
Right.
Haul this back to my garage. I make double the amount of wine.
And?
Just as bad.
Just as bad.
And I'm thinking, like, I'm a chef. I can follow a recipe here. I know I'm doing the right thing. 6 months later, they rip all the vines out, and I see the guys with the heavy equipment. I go, what's going on here? I go, oh, these vines are super diseased. The grapes are terrible. And I go, oh, you got to be kidding me. All this work. I'm like, okay. So I recognized, like, as a chef, and you're making a cookie and you got butter, sugar, flour, oatmeal, and raisins. If you only have a couple ingredients, the ingredients have to be good.
I was just going to say, at the end of the day, the ingredients matter. And quick pause to say hello to Dan Goderis. Say hello to AJ Walker. Thanks for jumping in. So you stole some wine, or stole some grapes, made some terrible wine. I'm sure the dog label that you just showed me was TTB certified, and you submitted the COLA for all that. And
no.
I don't know if that was a requirement back then. I'm sure the statute of limitations has long since run out.
I actually ran the label by Sutter Home's compliance department, and literally the woman started laughing at me. Her name was Sandy, and she laughed at me.
I love it. So then and I appreciate the mechanical engineering science side of this, the culinary side of this, because, we've talked about for years in wine how it is art and science. And the science part makes sense to you because of certainly the way you think and the skills that you have in that department. Where did the passion for the culinary thing just came from? Kind of watching TV shows and figuring out, okay, this looks kind of cool because I love food and I want to figure out that whole thing. And then you wanted to do it with wine. So you made 2 bad batches of wine. How did you decide to cure that problem?
Well, so I figured out after much consternation that I thought it was the raw product. So I go to Sutter Home and I said, hey, do you guys have any good Syrah? And they said, yeah, well, we're using this vineyard in Carneros, which is in South Napa. So I said, hey, can I just buy a half a ton off you guys? So they said, sure. So I wrote them a check, had a neighbor put it in his truck and drive it over to my house. We crushed it in my driveway. And, I bought a used barrel. I built a styrofoam igloo in my garage with an air conditioner on. I babied this thing for 18 months. We bottled it and it was excellent. And I said, okay, you know what? I see what the problem was. First of all, anything that's easily stolen isn't worth it. Second, you got to buy good ingredients, which is the grapes. And then, you know what? Look, as long as you don't screw it up, you're liable to get a pretty good product. And the science portion of it, that's what you do to keep it on the rails, right? People have been making wine for 5,000 years, right? there wasn't any science 1,000 years ago.
Let me do this real quick. Dan Godaris lives in Iowa, and you said you built the styrofoam igloo.
Yes.
And I know Dan has a garage. Dan, I'm thinking this might be a summer project for you to harvest some wines, but I'm also going to launch our first poll question for the audience. So the Greases are usually the speed dial winners, and we'll see if Mr. Brubaker has fast fingers. But earlier in the conversation, Kevin mentioned a song called "Don't Go Back to Rockville." It's whoever is the speedy answers. I see a whole bunch of answers. Come on, we have to read. There we go. There's a smart answer. The question is, who sang it better? REM, 10,000 Maniacs, or yours truly? I like to see these votes. We're going to give this 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Sorry, Michael Stipe.
Who's Martin?
Knock it off.
No, I'm being dead serious.
That's me.
Oh, you singing it. I get it.
There we go.
I thought you had like Cher or Lady Gaga. Yeah, one name.
That's right. When Cellar Angels gets so famous, I am just going to drop my last name. It's just going to be Martin.
I've already dropped mine. It's such a pain in the butt.
Well, and I also like that you said, I learned that if something's easy to steal, you might as well just start with better ingredients. And my first thought was, or find something harder to steal.
Yeah. Look, if someone's got a refrigerator on their front lawn, it's probably not a great refrigerator, right? So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
So the Syrah you made that you babied and pampered. And by the way, why did you pick Syrah when you're in cab country?
Interesting one, actually, because, so my neighbor, Tom Rinaldi, winemaker at Duckhorn, right? Talented guy. One day I'm having a party and he wanders in and he brings over a Dellinger Russian River Estate Syrah from 2005. And I drank this thing and I just started staring at the bottle and I'm thinking, oh my God, I've never tried anything like this. I was, back in those days, I was a cab drinker, probably some Pinot, but I had this Syrah and that was kind of a life-changing moment. I think when you talk to winemakers and you ask them what their favorite varietal is, you're going to get a lot of people that say Syrah because it's a winemaker's grape. It's generous. You can make a lot of different styles out of it. But when I tasted this thing, it was blackberry and it tasted like blackberry cobbler. And I was like, oh, and that right there, I said to myself, I'm going to make a killer Syrah. That changed my whole course on cool climate. I mean, Napa's cool climate, but Sonoma's cooler. Mendocino's colder. So, right. Yeah, so the cool climate thing, really, that was the day it all changed for me. That one bottle, and whenever I find that bottle at auction, I buy it because it's still as good today as it was back then.
And also Syrah is such a great food pairing wine and very versatile. So there's your culinary background again coming to play. So, okay, so you had, I won't even say a little bit of success. You knocked it out of the park with the Syrah.
Yes. Yeah, so based on that, I gave a couple friends at business school a couple bottles, and they announced me. They went through the whole class at Wharton on the second day of class, and they said, "Hey, Kevin's a winemaker," and I got up and I said, "Who wants to make wine in my garage with me?" 63 people raised their hand, and I was like, "Uh-oh." So we had to do 3 barrels of wine, and today that 2008 Santa Barbara Syrah, I have asked all my business school classmates to sell the bottles back to me. It is still to this day, possibly one of the top 3 wines I've ever made in my entire life.
Wow.
Every time I drink it, it is better than the last time I drank it.
And how much did you make of it?
We made 71 cases.
Oh yeah, you said 3 barrels. So,
and yep. I own 1 Magnum.
Is that ever going to get cracked?
I'm thinking at the end of COVID, we're going to crack it. It's already been moved from 3 different houses, so it's time.
3 different houses, a couple of earthquakes, fires. I mean, I think it might be time.
Yeah, it's we're actually the 10 plagues are being descended upon Northern California right now. Locusts, I hear this is the year for cicadas, so we just may nail them all this year.
Oh my goodness. And then, so like what folks have in their glass right now, most of them have the Chardonnay.
Sure.
And you have the passion for the Syrah. You mentioned it a second ago, cool climate grapes.
Yep.
And so why cool climate? How do you source the vineyards? And I'm going to put up a chart of where this vineyard is so people can see it.
Sure.
And kind of walk us through the magic that is the cool climate area.
Yeah. So, so acid, so when people comment on my wines, I think the prevailing direction that everyone's been going the last 10 years is lower acid wines, higher alcohol, richer flavors, a very American palate. I call it kind of a Coca-Cola palate, right? My wines tend to be a little bit more acidic, a little bit more floral, but they also tend to be full flavor. And that is only achievable in cool climates. Okay. Areas that hug the coast, if you get more than 15, 20 miles inland, anyone who's not from California, gets pretty warm. Even Napa Valley during the day can hit 100, 101 degrees. It's at night, even on a 100-degree day, it usually cools down into the high 40s. So it's this diurnal thing. And that's what makes Napa and Sonoma such an amazing place to grow grapes. It's one of the few places in the world that you get that high temperatures for ripening during the day, but those cool, the breeze and the fog blow in off the coast, and it cools down sometimes 50 degrees in a 3 to 5 hour period. Happened here last night. It was 95, and by the time I went out running, it was 57.
That's incredible. Let me actually just show some folks or everyone where we are specifically talking about. So I hitched a ride with SpaceX, and then looking back, I snapped this with my Samsung smartphone. And what Kevin just beautifully enunciated was, in fact, Napa and Sonoma and the coastal influences. So we'll talk a little bit about wine region, and some of you, the Greases, I'm sure have seen this with us before, but you can actually see Napa County right here and Sonoma County. And Kevin is absolutely right, because when you start moving inland 10, 15, 20 miles and you start getting over here, it gets hot. This area here in Sonoma County, there's a formation called the Petaluma Gap, and I'll show you that, because it is actually a little, they didn't think long and hard about this name. There is a gap between mountains right there that literally acts almost like a vacuum cleaner off the ocean and just pulls that maritime fog and that cool temperature off the Pacific. And people say, well, what does it look like? I mean, we tell them, and Kevin, you see it virtually daily probably, there's this blanket of fog that actually just kind of covers the grapes, and oftentimes till 11 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And it looks a little bit something like this. So this is my future home, but this is kind of the Petaluma Gap area with the fog coming off of the ocean and just getting sucked down into the valley. And imagine the vineyards that are below here in the valley that are just blanketed, and it's people call it nature's air conditioning. And it's a very cool aspect that just keeps the cool climate grapes cool, because Kevin knows better than anybody. Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, they do not like a lot of fluctuation of temperature extremes back and forth, and they thrive in an environment like this. And it's just a unique area in the world to be able to have this type of climatic condition and atmospheric condition off the coast. So it really is something to behold. And if you ever get a chance to experience it and stay out at a place above the fog line, if you will, and then come out in the morning and have your coffee, the views are spectacular. And then the last thing I'll share is kind of we'll go back over here, and we'll show them where you source this Chardonnay from, because it's not that far. You can see here's the Petaluma Gap right through here, and here's the San Giacomo Roberts Road Vineyard that we'll zoom in on. So just to give folks a little bit of scale here, this is the San Giacomo family vineyards. This is 130-acre vineyards, and there are 30 different wineries that actually source grapes from here. And many of them are household names that you probably have heard of, probably have had. And Kevin, if I'm not mistaken, this is you up here?
In fact, if you go to that very back line, right, you had it right there, right where your hand was, right where you had it. That's where the Chardonnay comes from. It's the last, and right in between those, this little peninsula out here where your thumb is, that's an old riverbed. It's covered with rocks. So I actually had to buy a new car. I sold my truck and I had to buy a Land Rover just to make sure I could get to that part of the vineyard.
Oh, so you've got to go all the way back over here and then cut through here or come through here?
I cut through the front of the vineyard and I drive down those lanes, and then I cut right above where San Giacomo Roberts Road is. I cut through there. I go up there, right where your hand is, and then I cut over that riverbed, and it's all rocks. So it should be. I wish I could film it. It's like a postcard for Land Rover. So it's the one time a year I get to use the car in the way it was intended. The rest of it's on the 101. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, here's a kind of a look at the Roberts Road Vineyard. And you have, you're up here in that little finger that we just saw, across from Copper Creek. And it's just interesting. The green blocks represent Chardonnay, red blocks represent Pinot Noir. And the San Giacomo family has been farming this vineyard, and I think they planted the grapes in '99, but they've got multiple generations in Sonoma, just making and farming unbelievable vineyard sites. And the Roberts Road one is pretty special. So how did you come to discover it for Chardonnay, and why is it important for you to source your fruit from there?
Yeah, so here's the thing about Montagne Russe, which means roller coaster in French. I don't think we actually ever said it, but we only work with people who farm their own land. And it's important for me. Someone once told me, are you the bacon or the eggs? And for breakfast, the chicken donates the eggs. The pig is breakfast, right?
The pig's committed.
The pig is committed, right? And I want growers who are not afraid to put their name on the bottle, that live on the land or on that land or are farming that land, because I can't be out there, 120 days during the growing season. They have to be my eyes and ears. And I'll tell you, the San Giacomo is awesome people. I sit down in a tasting with all the different wineries that use their grapes, and they'll call me up. They've done it twice now, and they'll say, hey, Kevin, you know what? Your Pinot Noir from block 1, which was down at the bottom, we have a couple winemakers that are sensing some issues with the ripeness of the grapes. Why don't you run out there and tell us what you're seeing? They are my early warning system. And not a lot of growers will do that. A lot of them are just looking to sell you grapes. These guys are committed. These guys are committed. They will run out there on a Sunday if they know there's rain coming, and they will pick 2 tons of Chardonnay or Syrah for me. They will do it. And a lot of people who have 130 acres aren't going to give Montagne Russe the time of day. These guys are professional farmers. They've been farming for 90 years. They're awesome people. And that's who I want to work with. And all the vineyards I work with, or I continue to work with, I should say, are awesome people. They're people first, farmers second. And at the end of the day, it's not about the grapes. It's a little bit about the land, but it's all about the people. So when you got people like the San Giacomos behind the wine helping me out, look, 90% of what's happening is on that vineyard. It's not me in the cellar. I mean, I can't fix bad grapes. I can do some stuff, but they're delivering awesome stuff. And they're the ones I think that probably deserve a lion's share of the credit for growing just really great stuff.
Well, and plus you have a background of knowing, hey, I can't do anything with bad grapes. That's how I got my start. It's not going to be anything good.
You make great vinegar out of bad wine.
That's a good point. You can make great vinegar out of bad wine. So talk to me about this bottle, the 2017 Chardonnay, and the Roberts Road Vineyard. And everyone that I see online right now is actually drinking this. And by the way, for those of you that are not drinking this, You need to go to the Cellar Angels website and you can order a SIP kit, SIP standing for shelter in place. And we do these kits, they change every week, but they have 6 wines in them. So if you were to go there tomorrow, you will have a chance to get a 6-pack of wine, and it will have the next 6 events every Friday night. So you will be able to taste along with folks like Kevin. And this Chardonnay, talk to us about it.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I don't shy away from oak. As a chef, I like to use my ingredients, and I don't shy away from powerful ingredients as long as they're in proportion. So the fruit on this wine, it was picked, I want to say probably a smidge riper than I was originally going for in the final week of harvest in 2017. And people will remember 2017 if you don't, because so much has happened between now and 2017, but we had some massive fires. And this wine was picked the day before the fires started. So this was the last thing I picked. My Syrah, my Pinot, everything was in this Chardonnay. It was the last Chardonnay that came in. So it got a little bit on the ripe side, but the acids are still really evident on this wine. So it's got some really nice ripe characteristics. I hesitate to say pineapple. I think it's got a little more tree fruit, golden apple, quince. But when you get really, and this is what Sonoma's great at. This is what I think sets Sonoma apart from all other Chardonnay producing regions in the world. You know, Burgundian Chardonnay is super flinty and it's got that mineral thing going on. This has got some mineral, but the fruit is really evident on this wine. So when you've got great fruit, you can pair really great oak with it. So this wine, I made 5 barrels, 125 cases. That's it. So everyone who's watching right now should know there is exactly 72 bottles of this left right now. We're down to the end. I'm drinking a bottle of it as you are. But I used 2 out of 5 barrels were new French oak. And I threw in as an experiment a really toasty Francois Frere barrel. Never done it before. I've never done it since. But there's a little bit of a smokiness on this wine, right? Like when you toast brioche, you get that little char on the bread. That's what this wine has. And it's got a very Montrachet quality to it, those rich Burgundian wines. I'm sorry, there's a squirrel. Literally, I have ADD and there is a squirrel outside the window. But that is a total ADD moment with squirrel.
Squirrel.
There was literally a squirrel. I was like, squirrel.
And your name is Kevin.
Yeah. I've got AD. What were we talking about? So this wine, Montrachet, it's got this little bit of a smoky characteristic to it. I call it burnt matchstick, reductive. And a lot of winemakers kind of strive for this style because it doesn't happen often. You can't make a wine reductive on purpose. It just kind of happens. And I kind of went with it. It's a very unusual Chardonnay. It's rich in fruit. Like I said, there's quince and pear, but it's got this toastiness on it. It's a very complex Chardonnay. It's almost a meal in a glass. Pairs very favorably with food, but it's not this fat California Chardonnay. You know, it's not Rumbauer, which I like the Rumbauers. They're good people. It's not that. A lot of acid, a lot of fruit, a lot of oak. It's a pretty cool Chardonnay. And the last, 24 bottles, I'm going to yank them away from you guys. I'm going to put them in the cellar for a couple of years. I'm going to see what happens to this thing.
Well, and I also like that the way you described it, I think is spot on because oak gets kind of overused and there's a lot of manipulation in wine, as you know, and just using the right ingredients. Again, there's a theme here, right? You use great ingredients. Usually good things will happen if you just get out of the way. But this has got a really long finish. And you're looking at 15 seconds or so of just finish. And there's that creaminess, but there is the acid. And it's just, as you said, very proportioned. And that I really, really like about it. It is just, and it does have a little bit of that Montrachet element to it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. When I was in culinary school, the one thing the head chef would say is always needs more salt. I think in wine, Look, I think a wine can be too acidic. Absolutely. I taste a lot of wines every day. Well, not every day anymore, but I taste wines all the time. And I'm like, whoa, the acid on this is crazy, right? A little too much. But people comment and say, Kevin, do you ever make a wine that doesn't have a fair bit of acid to it? And the answer is no. I'll
Right.
drink wines, I'll buy wines that don't have a lot of acid. But look, when you're looking for a wine that's going to stand up to the test of time, is going to pair with food, you want the wine to be part of the show. You don't want it to be necessarily the main attraction. Everything's got to play well together. The wine should be a component. The food should be a component. They got to be simpatico. So I try to make my wines a little bit more food friendly, but look, they're not going to be, 11.9% battery acid either. Trust me, there's a lot of flavor in this wine.
Well, and like you said, this is a meal in a glass type of thing where you can have it without food, but it would pair well with a variety of foods. And I'm thinking, because of the acid, the first thing that comes to my mind is scallops in some way, shape, or form. What do you, over the years, what have you paired well with it that is just home run material?
I'm from Maryland, so you're not going to put shellfish by me, and I'm not going to say no, right? But if you're Dungeness crab, it's a West Coast thing here, but on the East Coast, blue crab. I once paired a soft shell crab po' boy with this. Because it's so rich and acidic and meaty, you can pair something that's got an aioli on it. It'll absolutely work. I'm also, as this wine's aged a little bit, I'm thinking turkey, quite frankly. Dark meat. One of my mom's favorite things to make was turkey croquettes. I used to request them. Meanwhile, in France, that's what you do with the leftovers. I would request them as a kid. I was the only 11-year-old kid requesting, turkey croquettes. I don't know why. I love them. It's rich, but that acid will cut through anything creamy, anything with butter, anything with cheese, quite frankly. I think you want mac and cheese, I think this will do it. Totally.
And you talked a little bit about kind of someone pulling you aside, and Mr. Rinaldi, as a matter of fact,
yes,
as a neighbor, but you also had some neighbors that were not so hospitable.
Yeah. So the term Montagne Russe. So here's how Montagne Russe came to be. So I was making wine with my neighbor, quite frankly. And I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Up. And
Kevin, hello, we just said squirrel, and we just said Kevin. It's the two main characters.
It meant to be, right? I have deer as well, but the squirrel somehow got me. I hope this is being recorded. That's clinical ADD. But literally a squirrel. So, I'm making wine in my garage. We're in 2013. The project keeps growing. The wine's good, right? So friends tell friends. Before you know it, I've got 120 people in this garage project, right? And look, am I breaking the rules here? Sure. I know people who did far worse, but one hot summer day, I'm literally packed my truck up. I'm going to drive all the way up to Whistler and go mountain biking. I don't know how to mountain bike, but I had a mountain bike, so I was going to go do it. So I get a call as I'm getting in the truck. Your grape, I bought your Galupi fruit, the fruit that won the Taste of Paris in 1976, I believe, or 70, whatever.
76.
Yep. Pam Bacigalupi calls me up and she says, "Hey, your Pinot's ready." And I'm looking at I was looking at my watch, but I was looking at the calendar. I was like, oh my God, this is a month early. So I called up a bunch of friends. We went out and got the fruit. We crushed it in my garage. I called a bunch of friends to do the punch downs while I was going on vacation. And some water got on my neighbor's driveway.
Water.
So he writes, the next day I get back in the truck. Now I'm going to start my journey a day late. And I get this, it's my first iPhone. I see page after page after page, this email of foul word, this, water, driveway, bad word, I'm like, oh my God. So I wrote him back a very, very simple reply. I said, it's just water. Go blank yourself. Okay, now look. after looking back on this situation, probably a little direct. Hey, I'm an East Coast guy, right? When you say that to someone, that's like, hey, I love you, bro, right? But not quite that. But look, he didn't take it the same way, and he called alcohol, tobacco, and firearms on me. Okay.
How do you, seriously? I mean, so ATF comes and they question you and they do what?
Well, not just ATF. The California Alcohol Beverage Control, Napa Environmental, and the Napa District Attorney showed up at my driveway at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, right? They all flashed badges. There were guns in there. There were holsters. I made that part up. I don't think there were really guns. I embellish. I'm a talker. And so I kind of try to talk my way out of it. Do you have, I don't know, what do you call it? A search warrant? I'd watched enough, CSI fill in the blank.
Docudramas.
Yeah. So I let him in. They saw what was going on. Napa Environmental walked away. Napa DA walked away. Alcohol Beverage Control stayed 10 minutes. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms stayed for 2 hours and cataloged everything in my garage. Next thing I know, they serve me a notice saying I'm not to remove any wine from the garage while the investigation's going on. That's when I hired an attorney. We fought for 4 months. We agreed that I pour 4 barrels of wine on the ground. The ATF agent had to hop in my truck and go and watch me pour the wine on the ground. I shook his hand. We've never spoken again. The alcohol, tobacco, and firearms charged me $89.23 in back taxes for all the wine that went out of my garage. And I agreed to never make wine in my garage again. So, but you sigh, but you know what? He did me the biggest favor on the planet, because a year later, I'm making Pinot Noir and I'm sitting with my boss and I get a text message that our first Pinot Noir scored 95 points from Robert Parker. And our first Chardonnay scored 91. And I thought to myself,
were those made in the garage?
No, these were the real wines after I settled with ATF. I wasn't going to do it in my garage again. But I kind of thought, I had 2 thoughts that went through my mind.
Right. I see what you're saying. So he forced you to be serious and get real.
He forced me to go legal with it. He forced me to bring the wines, out into the open. And it's been a roller coaster ever since. But I had 2 thoughts instantly when I heard the 95 points. My first thought was, and this is just because of Kevin's little ego thing going, I knew it. Second thought was, you know what? If he had never done that, I never would have made this wine. I never would have gotten it in front of people. I never would have gotten it in front of Robert Parker. And, look, I saw him in the grocery store 3 weeks ago. He doesn't even recognize me anymore, But at the end of the day, he did me the biggest favor on the planet. If he hadn't done it, I'd still be making the best garage wine in the world. And
I do appreciate that story and it actually, the lessons learned. You've learned a bunch of lessons from violating the law. I myself will share these off the record sometime as well. I am curious about one thing, actually. Jeff Greasy is curious. Tell us the timing sequence of wine from when you harvest to the bottle and the route the wine takes. So, you've got to pick it.
Yep.
You walk us through, you pick, it's in bins, you put the bins in larger bins, the bins go into a truck, they come in, and walk us through that whole process in the time in weeks, days, months, years before it hits the bottle.
So typically I call a pick, let's say on a Tuesday. Usually either it's Wednesday or Thursday. The people who pick the grapes pick through the night. I pick up the grapes probably 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, not unusual. Or I'm out there. I've been out in San Lucia Highlands at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, supervising the pick. Drive the grapes to the winery, unload the grapes.
By the way, the winery is behind me.
So we make the wine at Keller Estate, which is, and you're not really a Keller Estate, I'm assuming, but
you never know.
Technology. But so I drive the grapes to Keller Estate where you're sitting. If it's hot out, we'll throw some dry ice on it, but usually within the hour, 2 tops, we usually dump the grapes either straight to, if it's white, straight to the press. If it's red, we put them on a conveyor belt. We pick out any bad bunches. It goes through a destemmer. It then goes immediately into a tank where it sits for 5 days.
So no like sorting table for the whites?
Yeah, that escalator, that sort
Okay.
of for the whites. No,
Yeah.
for whites typically no. For whites typically we don't because there's almost no skin contact. You're pressing immediately, right?
Got it. Yep.
If I were going to do an orange wine, I may, but usually the skin contact, or if the grapes are really moldy or there's a mildew problem, yeah, maybe. So reds, we put them in a tank. We cool the tank down for 5 days down to about 45 degrees. We prevent fermentation. And after 5 days, we turn the cold glycol off. We let the tank heat up. The fermentation starts. Fermentation, if all goes well, about 7 days. If it goes really, really badly, 14 days. Fermentations have gone badly. Then usually we try to press off within a couple days, 2 to 3 days after fermentation. So total time in tank, about 10 days to 2 weeks. It gets pressed. We press it into a tank for 2 days. We let all the stuff settle. Tank to barrel where it sits between, for Pinot Noir, 10 months. My Chardonnays, I let sit for 15 months, and my Syrahs sit for 18 months. If the wine tastes great, I do nothing. If the wine starts to get stinky, I take the wine off the lees, which is the dead yeast. And you mentioned the creaminess in this Chardonnay. That's because it sat on the lees, the dead yeast in the barrel. It gives it that creaminess. But sometimes lees are good. Sometimes they're not so good. When the lees start to stink, we take the wine off. We put it back into barrel. We clean the barrel. We put it back into barrel. And then usually it bottles a couple months later. So the whole process is 10 to 18 months.
Wow. And I think it's interesting that the variables in there that are out of your control, where you have to literally call an audible. You know, you talked about the lees and say, okay, let's get this out.
Yep.
Let's re-rack and clean the barrels and get this back into the barrel. Where someone making 50,000 cases or 1 million cases, they aren't doing that.
No, they're not doing it. And look, I've had to deal with fires. I've had to deal with bears. I've had to deal with the federal government. And I've had to deal with a whole host of other problems. The good news is, and what I've learned over the years, and back to the roller coaster theme, when I used to make wine in my garage and I tasted something I didn't like, I would have a panic attack. What I've learned, and our tagline for our winery is enjoy the ride. Because at the end of the day, there's very little you can't fix, right? You may not like the fix. You may not like the amount of work that the fix entails. But as long as you follow the process and you're tracking the chemistries, there's not a lot you can't overcome. So when you talk about Pinot Noir or even Chardonnay, I taste stuff all the time. It tastes terrible one day. A month later, it tastes fine. The Pinot Noirs right now, the 19s, they taste super bitter. 5 years ago, I would have been sweating bullets. Oh my God, I've ruined all the wine. This is terrible. Now I've learned to just kind of sit back, relax, because it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And
Well, I mean, it's a perfect time to talk about the name Montagne Russe. And in the closing moments here with regards to Montagne Russe actually is a French term for a Russian type of artifact or roller coaster. I mean, in French, it means roller coaster, yes?
Yeah, so it means Russian mountain in French. And if
Russian mountain, that's right.
If you go to France, Italy, or Spain, or any Latin-speaking country, a roller coaster is called Montagne Russe or Montagne Russa. And it's because the Russians brought these ice sleds to Paris back in the late 1800s, and the French are very literal. So they named it Russian mountains. Now here's the irony. You go to Russia, apparently someone told me they're called American mountains. So who knew, right?
Well,
I'm not going to Russia anytime soon, but.
No, and I love the fact because you've already described the ups and downs of the wine business, and not only just the wine business, but winemaking, vineyard sourcing, barrel aging, neighbors with less than desirable attributes and wanting to do harm. And it is a roller coaster. I mean, the ups and downs, this I think is aptly named. And with that, I'm going to actually launch our last polling question. So for those of you who are ready to play, there is a lot of prize money at stake here. Kevin from Up wants to know, Montagne Russe translates to Russian mountains, as he just said, and is used to describe the roller coaster which debuted in Paris, France in 1817. When did the first roller coaster debut in the United States? 1904, 1901, 1884. I'm going to give this, come on, everybody, get back to your computers.
Martin, do you know which roller coaster it was, by the way?
I don't know the name of it. But
Okay.
see, this is where people are cheating because I know they're getting on Google right now.
On the internet, yeah. This is why Trivia Night sucks now.
All right, this has got 3 seconds. We've got a tie. 1904 is not the correct answer. The correct answer is actually 1884.
Where was it?
Coney Island.
Wow.
Coney Island, I cannot remember the name of the roller coaster, but I can tell you, and you will see this in Google, that it actually moved at a blazing speed of 6 miles an hour. So it is fascinating to recognize that roller coasters are still around today. The roller coaster of winemaking is still around today. I am thrilled, Kevin, that you're producing what you're producing. And I don't know what the plans are to go from 1,000 cases to 1,000,000 cases, or maybe 1,000 cases to 2,000 cases.
I think COVID may have delayed the plans slightly,
Yep.
but we're going to plow through, and hopefully everyone on who's watching, support your small wineries, because look, the big guys are going to survive. And I posted something recently. You don't want to live in a world in 12 months where the 3 places you're going to shop are Amazon, Target, and Costco, right? So the small people are producing some really cool stuff. That's where the innovation's taking place, and that's where the passion is. So whether it's me or one of the other 6 bottles you got in your SIP package, support those guys, or women for that matter. I say guys, my mom used to get on me when I say you guys. She was very progressive back in the day. But support the small growers, because they're the people who are pouring their heart and soul into it.
And let me ask you this, when the restrictions start to get peeled back a lot and people can come taste with you, where do they taste with you?
Right behind your head, actually, right through that door. The Kellers have allowed me to use their cave. So we bring people in, we sit in the cave room with a candelabra, and we taste wine for a couple hours. I pull some barrel samples out. We taste some really cool stuff. Maybe if I'm feeling saucy, we pull a library wine out, but it's always a great time. And, you know, I always have a great time doing it. My introvert side is exhausted, but my extrovert side cannot wait to get in front of people. So we can't wait till it's the restrictions are lifted, and we want you guys to come out and taste with us.
Yeah, and it's actually a fantastic time in that cave with Kevin. That probably sounds wrong, but it
I just said the van. I mean, geez.
That's right. But listen, I want to, Kevin, thank you for spending an hour of your afternoon with us. Everyone, actually, Kevin had mentioned it, get the SIP kits. You can go to cellarangels.com. You get a kit. It has 6 bottles. This isn't, to use Kevin's phrase, this isn't rocket science. Just go order a SIP kit, and you get the next 6 Fridays in a row. We have a new charity partner, and Kevin was a great segue, called Save the Family Farms, because the Save the Family Farms charity, they are designed to help the small production wineries. So whatever you want to buy, if you want to pick them as a charity recipient for the proceeds, that's who we will give to. Next week, we have another Sonoma person. John Phillips from Inspiration Vineyards will be our guest on SIP, and it will be a fun time. I promise you, he has not been chased by the law as many times as Kevin. And to borrow another, if we go with the music theme, Kevin apparently has fought the law, but the law hasn't won.
Well, it's a little bit before my time.
Come on! I fought the law and the law won?
On our 68 Chevelle, I heard that playing quite a bit, but yeah, totally.
All right, you be safe. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And Kevin, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right,
See you
thank
soon.
you so much. Be safe, all right?
All right, cheers.
Thanks.